The words reached my ears like a knife through the noise of birthday laughter. "While I distract him, you go change the locks." Grace's whisper slipped across the table to her husband, Ethan, as if I were deaf or already gone. They thought I was too busy cutting my birthday cake, too blinded by the candles marking 70 years of life to notice betrayal being planned right beside the wine glasses. But I heard everything, and the worst part wasn't the plot itself. "Everything you did for me? You mean sending your husband to change my locks while you distracted me?" Her face froze. For a second, she forgot how to breathe. "Dad, you heard that?" "I did," I said, "every word." The table went silent. Even Anna stopped breathing. Ethan whispered something under his breath, but Grace shot him a look that could have cut glass. She turned back to me, trying to recover her composure. "Why didn't you tell us you were going to sell? You could have asked for help." "I didn't need help," I said. "I needed peace." I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the quiet power of the moment. The house had been my life's work, built over 40 years, brick by brick, shift after shift at the construction firm. When my wife Sarah passed away, that house was all I had left of her. I used to think Grace understood that, but somewhere along the line, she stopped seeing it as my home and started seeing it as her future. Grace finally found her voice again, her tone now colder, sharper. "So where are you living now, Dad? Did you think this through, or did you just give it all away?" "I moved into an apartment downtown, smaller, safer, easier to manage, and the money's in investments that will last me the rest of my life." Her face flushed deep red. "You can't do this, you've betrayed us." "No." The irony nearly made me laugh. "Betrayed you? Grace, you tried to steal from me. You wanted me out of that house while you changed the locks. Do you hear yourself?" Ethan reached for her hand, whispering something to calm her, but she jerked away. "You're making a mistake, Dad," she said. "You're letting paranoia make you do things you'll regret." I leaned forward slightly, meeting her eyes. "The only mistake I made was thinking you'd never turn against me." Anna's fork clattered onto her plate. "Grace, tell me he's wrong," she said softly. Grace didn't answer. Her silence said everything. I felt something shift inside me then. Not anger, not even sadness, but something quieter, resolve. It was the moment I realized I had to protect not just my home, but myself. The truth was, I had seen it coming months earlier. The subtle questions, the rehearsed concern, the sudden interest in my health and finances, it had all been leading to this. And now it was too late for them to pretend otherwise. "Dad," Grace said, her tone softening, slipping back into that sweet, manipulative rhythm. "You've been under a lot of stress lately. You're 70. Maybe you didn't think this through clearly." "I've been clear for 70 years, I interrupted. "I've built, repaired, and survived more than either of you ever will. I know exactly what I'm doing." She fell silent again. The air between us felt heavy, thick with things that couldn't be unsaid. Anna finally stood up, breaking the tension. "Maybe we should go," she murmured, glancing at me, then at Grace. Grace didn't move. Her eyes burned with something beyond anger, wounded pride maybe, or the realization that she'd lost control. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but it's no longer your fight." She left the restaurant without another word. Ethan followed a step behind, pale and silent. Anna stayed a moment longer, her expression a mix of sadness and disbelief. "Uncle Michael, I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's not your fault," I told her. "Sometimes blood isn't as thick as people say." She gave a small nod and walked away, leaving me alone at the table. I sat there for a while after they'd gone, listening to the clinking of dishes, the quiet conversations, the music humming faintly through the speakers. I felt lighter somehow, like a man who had finally stopped waiting for a storm that had already passed. I paid the bill, left a tip, and walked out into the California sunlight. The air was bright, clear, the kind of afternoon that used to make Sarah smile. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on my skin, and whispered to myself, "They thought they could take it all, but they forgot who built it." And that, I suppose, was the moment my real story began. To understand that moment in the restaurant, to make sense of how a daughter could whisper betrayal on her father's birthday, You'd have to go back 42 years back to when I was 28, standing in the rain outside a construction site that had just taken my best friend and my wife in the same year. Life has a cruel way of testing what's left in a man when he's got nothing left to lose. Sarah died of leukemia. She was 30. We had one child, Grace, barely 3 years old. It was how casual they sounded. Stay tuned. This story will make you rethink what family really means. For a moment, I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, pretending to focus on the slice of chocolate cake in front of me. My 70-year-old hands didn't shake, though my heart did. Grace leaned back in her chair, smiling, sipping her white wine as if nothing had happened. The bills swallowed everything we had, and when the insurance money came, it was too little, too late. I buried her with hands still calloused from laying concrete, still smelling of steel and dust. After the funeral, I remember sitting in our rented one-bedroom apartment, staring at Grace asleep in her crib, wondering what kind of father I could possibly be without her mother. I had $60 to my name, and a construction company that didn't owe me a thing once the job ended. So I started taking whatever work came: handyman gigs, roofing, plumbing, pouring driveways in neighborhoods where no one knew my name. I learned how to live on black coffee and canned beans, how to stretch $1 until it begged for mercy. Grace grew up watching me work, her little hands clutching a hammer like it was a toy. By the time I turned 30, I had one dream: to build something that would never be taken away from us again. A house. Not fancy, not big, but ours. I found a cheap lot on the edge of San Bernardino, just dirt and rocks and weeds. The owner laughed when I asked if the price was real. It was barely $1,200. I paid every cent I had and signed the papers with a pen that shook in my hand. That patch of dirt was the beginning of everything. Grace was 5 when I started building. Every Sunday, I'd take her to the site with me. She'd sit on a pile of bricks, watching as I framed the foundation, her hair tied up in a messy ponytail, her face smudged with dust. I worked weekends and nights, sometimes by flashlight, sometimes by moonlight. My hands cracked open, bled, and healed again. Every nail I drove into those walls felt like I was nailing my grief shut, one blow at a time. 4 years later, the house stood tall. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small front porch, and a garage that smelled like oil and sweat. It wasn't much to anyone else, but to me, it was proof that a man could lose everything and still build something beautiful from the ruins. When we moved in, Grace was 9. She ran through every room, laughing, claiming each corner like it was her kingdom. I stood on the porch that night, listening to the quiet hum of the city in the distance, and for the first time in years, I believed life might finally be fair again. But life doesn't stay fair for long. The years passed, and I kept working foreman, then supervisor, then safety manager. I saved every extra dollar. Grace went to a good high school, wore clean clothes, ate hot meals. I patched the roof when it leaked, planted roses in the front yard, because Sarah had loved them. Grace helped at first, but by her teenage years, she had stopped caring. She saw the house as small, outdated, embarrassing. "All my friends live in nicer places, Dad," she said once, her voice sharp like a blade. "Why can't we move somewhere better?" "Because this place is paid for," I told her. "Better doesn't always mean bigger." She rolled her eyes the way only teenagers can. I didn't argue. You can't teach gratitude to someone who hasn't yet felt hunger. When she turned 18, she told me she was marrying Ethan, a man she'd met barely 6 months earlier. I tried to warn her, told her she should finish her degree first, build a life before tying herself down, but she looked at me like I was trying to steal her freedom. So, I gave her the one thing I could, a wedding she didn't have to pay for, $3,000 from the savings I'd been keeping to fix the roof. I walked her down the aisle, feeling proud and terrified all at once. Ethan wasn't a bad man, at least, not at first. He sold insurance, made promises bigger than his paycheck. He smiled wide, shook hands firm, talked about investments and dreams and building a future. But dreams don't pay bills, and promises don't patch roofs. When their first child, Emily, was born, they could barely afford diapers. I helped when I could, 50 here, 100 there. I paid for school clothes, doctor visits, Christmas gifts. Grace never thanked me. She just assumed it was my duty, and maybe it was. Still, I loved her. Every time I saw Emily smile, I saw Sarah in her eyes. That little girl became the only real joy I had left. But with every passing year, Grace seemed to drift further away. She stopped calling unless she needed money, stopped visiting unless she wanted something fixed. When Ethan lost his job, she asked if they could temporarily move in. I said yes. I always said yes. For 6 months, the house that had been my sanctuary turned into a battlefield. Her husband, Ethan, excused himself with some nonsense about an urgent errand, something about the bank, and walked out through the restaurant's glass doors. I watched his reflection vanish in the window behind the candles, and I felt the kind of silence that only comes when you realize someone you love has turned against you. Grace reached across the table, touching my wrist. "Dad, you look so young today," she said sweetly. 70 and still handsome, lies dressed up as flattery, dishes piled up, arguments echoed through the hallways, and Ethan's beer cans rolled under the couch. When they finally left, the silence felt like a blessing. Then came the lawsuit. Out of nowhere, my late wife's brother Richard appeared after 35 years, claiming half the land where I built my house belonged to him. He waved papers that looked official, talked about family inheritance, and demanded $50,000 or a forced sale. I spent 2 years in court, 2 years of hell, paid $30,000 in legal fees, nearly lost my health from the stress. Grace visited me during that time, but only to ask how much the house was worth, or what the lawyer had said. She never offered help, never once asked if I was sleeping. When the judge finally ruled in my favor, I thought Grace would be happy. Instead, she looked disappointed. That was the day I realized something had broken between us, a quiet, invisible fracture that would never heal. She wasn't waiting for me to win, she'd been waiting for me to lose. After that, her visits became strangely regular every Sunday, always with Ethan, always with that same sweet, hollow concern. "Dad, this house is too big for you," she'd say. "You shouldn't be climbing stairs at your age." Or, "You should think about senior communities, safe, nice, with nurses available 24 hours. "I don't need nurses," I told her once. "I am the one who taught half the young men on the job site how to keep their fingers intact. I can take care of myself." But she kept insisting. "It's for your own good," she'd say. That phrase started to sound like a threat. One night, I overheard them talking on the patio. The window was slightly open, and the words came through like smoke. Ethan said, "He's 70. He's not going to live forever. We can't keep waiting." Grace replied, "I know, but I can't just ask him to give me the house. Not after that lawsuit. He'll never trust me." "Then convince him," Ethan said. "Tell him it's safer in your name. Tell him you'll handle the paperwork for his own good." My heart pounded so hard I thought they might hear it. I stayed still, listening. "It could work," Grace said finally. "I'll take it slow. First, I'll convince him to live with us for a while. Then we'll rent the place. After that, it'll be easier to make him transfer the title." The next morning, I made pancakes and smiled as if nothing had happened. I'd learned long ago that the best revenge against deceit is patience. For months, I pretended not to notice their little tests, Ethan taking photos of the house, for insurance purposes. Grace asking if I ever got confused about bills or dates, her subtle questions about where I kept my documents. They were preparing a narrative, one where I was the confused old man who needed saving from myself. But I wasn't confused. I was waiting. Then one afternoon, I overheard something worse. Grace and Ethan were on a conference call with a lawyer. They didn't know I was home. The lawyer said, "If your father shows signs of confusion, temporary guardianship can be granted. You'd have full control of his finances and property." "And how do we prove confusion?" Grace asked. "Neighbor testimony, psychological evaluation, maybe a small medical incident, anything that shows diminished capacity. It doesn't have to be permanent." I stood there in the hallway, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. They weren't planning to wait for me to die, they were planning to take everything while I was still breathing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, staring at the walls I'd built, and realized I couldn't save the house anymore, not by keeping it. The only way to protect what was mine was to let it go. So I did. I found a real estate agent, Susan Reed, sharp as a knife, professional and discreet. I told her I needed the sale done quietly, quickly. Within 3 weeks, it was done. I sold the house for $185,000, moved into a one-bedroom apartment downtown, and set up 3 separate bank accounts under strict legal protection. By the time Grace sent Ethan to change the locks, the house wasn't mine anymore. And that's why I sat there in that restaurant, calm as a man who's already seen the ending. Because I had. I nodded, smiled, even managed a chuckle, but my mind was racing. Anna, my niece, sat across from us, her phone out, snapping pictures of the cake, of me smiling oblivious to the quiet war happening right beside her. She chatted cheerfully about her new job and her plans to visit Hawaii in spring. I envied her innocence. As the minutes passed, Grace became almost theatrical in her effort to keep my attention. She showed me photos of Emily on her phone, ones I had already seen a dozen times. The night I overheard Grace plotting with that lawyer was the night something inside me finally broke, and something else, something tougher, took its place. I had spent my whole life fixing things that were cracked: walls, pipes, machines, hearts. But that night, I realized there are some things you can't fix. You can only walk away from them. At dawn, I brewed a pot of coffee and watched the first light crawl across the kitchen tiles. I had made breakfast for Grace at that same table when she was 6 pancakes, shaped like hearts, burnt on one side, but eaten with a grin. Now, 40 years later, I sat there alone, thinking how easy it is for love to turn into obligation, and obligation into resentment. I didn't cry. I was done with tears. Instead, I reached for my old notebook, the same one I used to keep job estimates in, and began writing a list. At the top, I scribbled 3 words: protect, prepare, disappear. The first call I made was to a lawyer recommended by an old co-worker. His name was Dr. Christopher Miller, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a voice calm enough to quiet storms. When I met him at his office downtown, I told him I needed to protect my assets from potential family conflict. I didn't mention Grace by name. I didn't have to. He'd seen this kind of story before. "You'd be surprised," he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's always the ones we love most who come for what we have when we can't defend it." "I'm not waiting for that day," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good. Then we'll make sure they can't touch a dime. Even if they try, you have 3 main options: create a living trust, transfer ownership with life estate rights, or sell and secure the funds under legal protection." "I don't want half measures," I said. "I want freedom. Sell it." Dr. Miller's brow lifted slightly. "Are you sure that's not an easy decision? Most people your age hold on until someone else makes the decision for them," I interrupted. "I've seen too many men lose their homes because they waited too long. I built mine with my hands. I'll be the one to decide when it changes hands." He smiled faintly, a mixture of respect and sadness. "Then we'll do it right. I know someone trustworthy in real estate, Susan Reed. She's discreet." And that's how I met Susan. She showed up the next afternoon in a neat grey suit, her hair tied back, eyes sharp and sympathetic all at once. She looked around my living room, the photos of Sarah, Grace's old drawings framed on the wall, the smell of sawdust still faint from my last repair project. "Mr. Harris," she said gently, "this house tells a story. You built it yourself, didn't you?" "Yes, every nail, every board. 40 years of my life are in these walls." She nodded. "Then let's make sure the ending is written by you, not someone else." Within a week, Susan had a buyer lined up, a young couple, expecting their first child. They reminded me of Sarah and me in our early days, hopeful, nervous, believing the world could be shaped by hard work alone. The sale price was $185,000. I accepted without hesitation. The night before signing the papers, I walked through the house one last time. The memories clung to every corner. The spot in the hallway where Grace had scribbled her name in pencil at age 7. The mark on the doorframe where I had measured her height every birthday. The kitchen, Sarah and I had painted yellow together one spring afternoon, laughing as we left streaks on each other's arms. I ran my hand along the wall and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't the walls I was saying goodbye to. It was the years. The sale closed 3 weeks later. I received the transfer confirmation while still sitting in the notary's office. My hands didn't tremble. Susan smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. Harris. You're officially free." "Freedom's expensive," I said, "but worth every cent." With Dr. Miller's help, I divided the funds into 3 separate accounts, one for investments, one for savings, and one for monthly expenses. Each account had ironclad protections. No joint access, no beneficiaries, no power of attorney. Dr. Miller made sure of that. "Even if someone tries to claim you're incapacitated," he said, "the bank will contact me directly. They'll need a court order to move a cent." I paid him his fee, $2,000, and walked out of his office with a quiet sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Then came the hardest part, moving out. I hired a small moving company that didn't ask questions. 2 men, 1 truck, paid in cash. They arrived early on a Tuesday when I knew Grace would be at work. By noon, the house was empty. She asked about my blood pressure, whether I had refilled my prescriptions, whether I'd been eating properly. Every word was a performance, every smile rehearsed. I kept playing along, nodding at the right moments, laughing where I was supposed to. I was the image of a grateful father surrounded by family, but inside, I was watching a carefully timed theft unfold. Ethan returned after about 50 minutes. His face looked pale, his eyes darting toward me before he sat down. My life, 40 years of it, fit into 13 boxes and 2 suitcases. I didn't keep much. The old photo albums, my tools, Sarah's wedding ring, a few shirts, and the framed photo of Grace as a child. The rest I donated to charity. The apartment Susan found for me was perfect, a small 1-bedroom on the 4th floor of a building downtown modern, safe, with a view of the city skyline. The neighbors were quiet, mostly retirees like me. The security guard, a tall man named Reggie, greeted me every morning with a nod. For the first time in decades, I didn't wake up to the sound of pipes creaking or rain leaking through the roof. At first, the silence was unnerving, too clean, too still, but slowly it became something else, peaceful. Every morning, I made coffee and watched the sun rise through the blinds. I took walks in the nearby park, where the air smelled of pine and the laughter of children echoed from the playground. I was 70, yes, but I wasn't done living. Still, I knew it was only a matter of time before Grace noticed. For 2 weeks, I kept my old phone on but didn't answer her calls. She left voicemail after voicemail. "Dad, where are you? I stopped by the house, it's empty. Are you okay? Dad, I'm really worried. Please call me. Dad, we need to talk. This isn't like you." Her concern sounded hollow to my ears, rehearsed like every conversation before it. I replied once, after the 5th message. "I'm fine. Please don't worry." That only made her more persistent. A week later, she showed up at my old address. The new owners, nice young couple named Daniel and Marissa, called me that evening. "Mr. Harris," Daniel said apologetically, "a woman came by today, said she was your daughter. She insisted she needed to get inside, said there must be a mistake with the sale." "There's no mistake," I told him calmly. "That house is yours now. She has no claim to it. If she returns, you can call the police." He hesitated. She seemed upset. "I'm sure she did," I said quietly. "But that's not your problem." When I hung up, I sat back in my armchair and sipped my tea, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and satisfaction. Grace had just discovered what betrayal looks like from the other side. Within hours, my phone exploded with calls again. Grace, Ethan, even unknown numbers. I let them ring. I knew what they'd say, and when I finally listened to the voicemails that night, it was exactly as I expected. "Dad, how could you do this? That house was supposed to stay in the family." "Michael, this is Ethan. You've made a terrible mistake. Let's talk before this gets worse." "Dad, please, we were just trying to help you." "Help me?" They'd tried to erase me. I deleted every message. The next morning, Dr. Miller called. "Mr. Harris, I've just received notice your daughter filed a petition for temporary guardianship. She's claiming concern for your mental health." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Of course she did. Let me guess. She says I'm confused, erratic, unfit to handle my own finances? Exactly. The hearing will be in 3 weeks. There will also be a court-ordered social worker visit to assess your living situation. Let them come, I said. They'll find I'm living cleaner and sharper than half the people in that courtroom. Dr. Miller chuckled. That's the spirit. Still, we'll need evidence. I'll schedule a psychological evaluation with a certified psychiatrist, Dr. Francis Williams. He's fair and thorough. The evaluation took place 3 days later. Dr. Williams was kind but sharp-eyed. He asked me to remember lists of words, solve small math problems, and interpret proverbs. After an hour, he smiled. Mr. Harris, your cognitive results are above average for your age. You show no signs of dementia or decline. In fact, you're sharper than most of my younger clients. Can I get that in writing? He grinned. Already typed and signed. I'll send it to your lawyer. Next came the visit from the social worker, a young woman named Emily Carter, polite but observant. She checked the fridge, the bathroom, the medicine cabinet, even my laundry basket, everything in order. She asked if anyone helped me with meals or cleaning. No one, I said proudly. I've been taking care of myself since I was 18. Don't plan on stopping now. When she finished, she smiled faintly. Mr. Harris, I visit many elderly people. Some truly can't manage. But you... She shook her head, amused. You don't need anyone's help except maybe to hang your curtains straighter. We both laughed. That night, I sat on my balcony overlooking the glowing city. I saw his hands tremble slightly as he lifted a glass of water. Grace noticed too. What took you so long? She asked, her voice low but sharp beneath the politeness. Ethan didn't answer right away. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Something went wrong, he finally muttered. The house. Grace blinked. What do you mean the house? The locks. I couldn't change them. There were people inside. New owners. They showed me documents, everything signed, legal, notarized. The air was cool, the world quiet. I thought about how far I'd come from a broke widower with a 3-year-old child to a 70-year-old man fighting for the right to his own life. I took a deep breath and whispered, "Let them come," because I already knew how this war would end. My 70th birthday arrived with little ceremony. I hadn't planned to celebrate it at all. What was there to celebrate? A year older, yes, but also a year wiser, a year lonelier, and strangely, a year freer. The idea of blowing candles and pretending to be a man surrounded by love felt like a lie I could no longer tell. But my niece Anna wouldn't hear of it. "Uncle Michael," she said over the phone, her voice warm and firm, "you can't let Grace steal your birthday too. Let me take you out for lunch. Just the two of us. No drama, no surprises." I hesitated. "Anna, I don't want to put you in the middle of this mess." "Your family," she said simply. "You are my middle." So, I agreed. I told her I'd pick the place a small Italian restaurant downtown, quiet, with white tablecloths and slow jazz humming in the background. I only gave her the address that morning. I wasn't taking chances. When we arrived, the waiter led us to a corner table by the window. The sunlight caught the dust motes floating in the air, turning them into tiny stars. Anna had brought a little chocolate cake, decorated with one candle. "Make a wish," she said. I smiled. At my age, a good night's sleep is a wish. We laughed. For a while, it almost felt like peace. We talked about her job, her new apartment, the way life in California could be both beautiful and brutal, depending on how much gas you had in your tank. She told me about her boyfriend, a decent kid named Mark, and asked if I still painted. "I haven't in years," I said. "But lately I've been thinking about trying again." She nodded approvingly. "Then that's your birthday gift to yourself. Start again." I was about to answer when the sound of a familiar voice sliced through the soft hum of conversation. "Well, isn't this nice?" I froze. Grace. She was standing by the entrance, Ethan right behind her. My chest tightened. She wore that same calculated smile, the one she used when she wanted something but pretended she didn't. Her eyes scanned the room like a hawk's until they locked on mine. "Dad," she said, walking toward the table. "Happy birthday. Anna vent parle." "I swear, Uncle, I didn't." "I know," I whispered. She must have checked your messages. Grace reached our table, her tone sugary and venomous all at once. I can't believe you'd celebrate your birthday without inviting your own daughter. I can, I said quietly. She ignored that. Mind if we join you? Before I could answer, Ethan dragged 2 chairs over and sat down. The audacity was almost impressive. Anna shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me, waiting for my signal. We need to talk, Dad, Grace said, her voice dropping into that serious, practiced register. About the house, about everything. There's nothing left to talk about, I said. The house isn't mine anymore. It's sold. Legally. Completely. End of story. End of your story, maybe, she snapped. But not ours. That house was supposed to stay in the family. You can't just... Can't what? I cut her off. Can't sell something I built with my own hands? Can't decide what to do with 40 years of my life's work? Grace, that house was never yours to claim. Her face hardened. We took care of you, she hissed. I laughed bitterly. You mean you tried to take care of my assets? There's a difference. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and falsely calm. Michael, we're not your enemies. We're just worried about you. You disappeared for weeks. You made huge financial decisions without consulting anyone. You're 70. 70, not senile, I interrupted. And you're living alone in some apartment no one knows about. That's concerning, don't you think? What's concerning, I said evenly, is that my daughter plotted with a lawyer to have me declared incompetent. Don't insult me by pretending this is about love. Grace blinked, taken aback for a second, then recovered. That's absurd. You're imagining things. You've been under stress. Maybe you misheard something. I didn't mishear anything, I said. My voice was steady, but my hands clenched in my lap. I heard every word. You planned to have me deemed unfit, so you could take control of my house and my accounts. And when you realized I was one step ahead, you filed for guardianship anyway. The table went still. Anna's eyes widened, her hand frozen halfway to her glass of water. Grace's lips pressed into a thin line. The house isn't in your father's name anymore. The color drained from Grace's face. The fork in her hand hovered midair. I kept my expression calm, even serene. Yes, I said quietly, setting down my napkin. I sold it 3 weeks ago. She turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief. You, what? I sold the house, Grace. For a long moment, she just stared. That's not what this is about, she said finally. You're confused, you're making up stories. Then why did you hire a lawyer who charges $10,000 for guardianship cases? I asked. Her composure cracked. Who told you that? You did, I said. You just didn't realize I was in the house that day. Ethan muttered something under his breath. Grace glared at him. Dad, she said, her voice softening. You're not well. You're paranoid. That's why we had to act. It's not about money, it's about keeping you safe. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. For a brief second, I saw the little girl she once was, the one who used to run barefoot through our backyard, her hair tangled with sunshine. That little girl had trusted me completely. This woman in front of me looked at me like a problem to be solved. If you loved me, I said quietly, you'd respect me. You wouldn't use the law to take my life apart piece by piece. Her eyes flashed. Respect? You sold our home behind my back. You've betrayed this family. The only betrayal here, I said, is yours. Ethan shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. Look, maybe we should all calm down. Calm down, I snapped. You broke into my life, tried to steal everything I worked for, and now you're telling me to calm down. The people at nearby tables began to glance our way. I didn't care. Grace's tone grew sharper. You're embarrassing yourself, Dad. You need help. Grace, she said gently, maybe this isn't the right place. Grace ignored her. Dad, we're not going to stop. You're our responsibility, whether you like it or not. If you won't listen to reason, the court will. I looked at her, really looked at her. My daughter, my blood, my biggest mistake and my greatest heartbreak. Then let the court decide, I said quietly. But know this, you've already lost. Grace blinked, thrown off. What's that supposed to mean? It means while you were busy plotting, I made sure there was nothing left for you to take. The money is protected. My accounts are under legal guard. My apartment is owned by a private corporation of which I am the sole beneficiary. Even if you win on paper, you'll lose in life. That sounds paranoid, she said coldly. No, I said, standing up. It sounds smart. I placed 3 $20 bills on the table, enough for the bill and a generous tip. Lunch is over. Dad, don't, I said. Don't call me that right now. Anna rose too, her face pale, eyes bright with anger and sadness. Happy birthday, Uncle, she whispered softly, squeezing my hand. We walked out together, leaving Grace and Ethan sitting there, speechless among the half-eaten plates and the wreckage of their own pride. Outside, the sun was blinding. I took a deep breath, feeling the air burn in my lungs. For the first time in years, I felt alive. As we reached the sidewalk, Anna turned to me. Uncle, are you okay? I nodded slowly. I am now. But even as I said it, I knew the battle wasn't over. Grace wasn't done. She'd try again through lawyers, through lies, through anything she could twist. That's what frightened me most. Not that she wanted my house, but that she wanted control. That night, I sat by my apartment window, the city lights flickering like a heartbeat in the dark. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good kind, aged longer than Grace had been married, and raised it toward the skyline. To the ones who underestimate their fathers, I murmured, may they learn the hard way who taught them strength. I drank it slowly, the warmth spreading through my chest like courage. 5 days later, the court hearing would begin, and I was ready. The morning of the hearing arrived grey and heavy, like the sky itself knew there would be no winners that day. I dressed carefully, grey suit, clean white shirt, shoes polished until they shone. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a man in full control of his mind, his dignity, and his life. Before leaving, I stood by the mirror for a long moment. The face staring back at me was older, sure, lined by 70 years of work and worry, but the eyes were steady. The eyes of a man who had spent his life building, not taking. The restaurant's hum of conversation went on around us, plates clinking, laughter in the background, all of it muffled by the storm building between us. Finally, she spoke, her voice tight with anger. That was supposed to be our inheritance. You can't just... It was my house, I interrupted softly. Mine to sell. I built it with my own hands. You forget who laid every brick. Grace's lips trembled, and Ethan sank lower in his chair, avoiding my eyes. Anna looked between us, confused. I whispered to my reflection, they'll see who you really are, Michael, and they'll know you're still standing. When I arrived at the courthouse, Dr. Miller was already there waiting. He greeted me with a firm handshake. You ready? As ready as a man can be, I said. He smiled slightly. Then, let's make them regret underestimating you. The courtroom was small but tense. Wooden benches, a clock ticking too loud. Grace sat at the opposite table, her hands clasped tightly together, her face pale but determined. Ethan sat beside her, pretending to look confident, though I could see the sweat beading at his temples. Their lawyer, a sharp man in an expensive suit named Harvey Black, shuffled papers with theatrical precision, as though the rustling alone could intimidate the room. When the judge entered, Honorable Robert Smith, a man with silver hair and sharp eyes, the air shifted. Everyone stood. I did, too, spine straight, chin level. Good morning, the judge said. We are here to evaluate the petition for temporary guardianship filed by Miss Grace Turner over her father, Mr. Michael Harris. Counsel, you may proceed. Harvey Black rose smoothly, his voice firm and rehearsed. Your Honor, we are here because a concerned daughter has noticed alarming changes in her father's behavior. Mr. Harris, 70 years old, recently sold his home of 40 years without consulting any family members. He has cut off contact, relocated without providing an address, and displayed increasing paranoia regarding those closest to him. He paused for effect, letting the silence weigh. These are behaviors consistent with cognitive decline and potential vulnerability. My client seeks only to protect her father, not to control him, but to ensure his safety and financial stability. Grace lowered her eyes like a devoted daughter at prayer. It was a performance worthy of a stage. I sat still, my hands folded on the table. Dr. Miller had told me, Let them speak first. Don't interrupt. The more they talk, the more they'll reveal their hand. Harvey continued. We have testimony from neighbors who noticed erratic behavior, confusion about dates, forgetting conversations. We have statements that Mr. Harris appeared lost in his own neighborhood. Lies. Every word, a carefully crafted lie. Furthermore, Harvey said, he has made financial decisions inconsistent with rational planning for someone his age. Selling a fully paid property without consulting family is reckless. We request temporary guardianship to allow his daughter to oversee his affairs and ensure his well-being. When he finished, the judge turned toward Dr. Miller. Defense? My lawyer stood, calm as ever. Your Honor, what we've heard is a narrative, nothing more. My client is not a confused old man. He's a retired construction foreman who spent 40 years building homes, including the one in question. He made the decision to sell it only after discovering that his daughter and son-in-law had consulted a lawyer about declaring him mentally incompetent. Harvey shot up from his seat. Objection, Your Honor, speculation. Dr. Miller didn't flinch. We have corroborating evidence that a consultation took place, including the name of the attorney and billing records. My client's actions were not the result of confusion, but of caution, a father protecting himself from an imminent betrayal. The judge lifted a brow. Proceed. Dr. Miller laid several documents on the judge's desk. Here we have an independent psychological evaluation from Dr. Francis Williams, a forensic psychiatrist with 30 years of experience. Uncle Michael, what's going on? Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart, I said gently, giving her a reassuring smile. Just a misunderstanding. But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the moment the truth finally tilted into the light. Grace's voice rose. You sold it without telling me? Without asking? After everything we did for you? I could have laughed if it hadn't hurt so much.